The message arrived at exactly 11:47 a.m. during advanced calculus. Seraphina Cade's phone buzzed once beneath her desk, the encrypted notification appearing as nothing more than a weather alert to anyone who might glance over. But the seemingly innocent string of numbers made her blood run cold. She had 2 hours to prevent the largest cyber attack in American history, and her teacher, Mr. Harwick, had just called her disappointingly average for the 3rd time this week. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories about hidden genius and underestimated heroes, consider subscribing for more tales that will change how you see the world around you. Seraphina slouched deeper into her seat at Roosevelt High School, her oversized hoodie and deliberately messy hair completing the image she'd cultivated for 3 years. To everyone around her, she was just another struggling junior who barely scraped by with C's and D's. Her backpack was covered in band stickers from groups she'd never listened to, her notebooks filled with doodles instead of notes, and her responses in class were always just articulate enough to avoid suspicion, but never impressive enough to draw attention. "Miss Cade," Mr. Harwick's voice cut through her thoughts like a blade. "Perhaps you'd like to enlighten us about the quadratic formula? Since you seem so fascinated by whatever's on your desk instead of the board." Scattered chuckles rippled through the classroom. Seraphina looked up with perfectly crafted confusion, blinking as if she'd been caught completely off guard. X equals something with a square root? More laughter. Even louder this time. Harwick shook his head with the exaggerated disappointment of a man who'd given up hope. "Perhaps if you spent less time daydreaming and more time studying, Miss Cade. Your last 3 test scores suggest you might benefit from remedial mathematics." Seraphina nodded apologetically, her cheeks reddening with what appeared to be embarrassment. Inside, she was calculating the trajectory patterns of 17 different satellite networks, while simultaneously running a background penetration test on the school's security system to ensure her phone's encrypted communications remained undetected. The truth was, Seraphina Cade had solved advanced calculus problems before her 10th birthday. She held 3 unofficial world records in competitive programming, had designed security protocols currently protecting half the Pentagon's servers, and had been recruited by 7 different intelligence agencies before deciding to work independently. The NSA called her Phoenix. The CIA knew her as Ghost Protocol. To international cyber criminals, she was simply the Shadow, an entity they feared but had never been able to identify. But to everyone at Roosevelt High, she was just Sarah, the quiet girl who sat in the back and barely passed her classes. Her phone buzzed again. This time she allowed herself a quick glance. The message was hidden within what appeared to be a social media notification, but the embedded code made her pulse quicken. Cardinal priority. Blackout protocol active. T-minus 116 minutes. "Miss Cade!" Harwick's voice was sharper now. "This is the 3rd time I've asked you a question. Are you even paying attention?" "Sorry," Seraphina mumbled, slipping her phone back under her desk. "Could you repeat the question?" Harwick's expression shifted from annoyance to something approaching disgust. "Class, this is a perfect example of why focus matters in mathematics. Miss Cade here has consistently demonstrated that talent without effort yields nothing. She could probably understand these concepts if she applied herself, but instead..." He let the sentence hang, allowing the implication to settle over the room. Several students turned to look at Seraphina with a mixture of pity and superiority. She maintained her slouched posture, but her mind was already 3 steps ahead, planning her exit strategy. The attack was being coordinated by a group calling themselves Digital Liberation Front. Sophisticated enough to penetrate preliminary government firewalls, but sloppy enough to leave traces that only someone with her level of expertise could detect. They'd been planning this for months, embedding malware in infrastructure systems across 14 major cities. Power grids, water treatment facilities, hospital networks, air traffic control. Everything would go dark simultaneously unless someone stopped them. Someone like her. Her phone buzzed a 3rd time. Another innocuous notification, but the code within made her stomach drop. Secondary confirmation. Nuclear facility systems compromised. Containment protocols at risk. This wasn't just a blackout anymore. If the malware reached the nuclear safety systems, the resulting chaos could kill thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. "I need to use the restroom," Seraphina said suddenly, raising her hand. Harwick glanced at the clock. "We have 15 minutes left in class, Miss Cade. Surely you can wait." "It's kind of urgent," she pressed, adding just the right amount of teenage discomfort to her voice. Several students snickered. Harwick sighed dramatically. "Fine, take the hall pass. Try not to get lost on the way back." As Seraphina gathered her things, she heard him address the class behind her. "Now, as I was saying about quadratic equations, notice how the discriminant determines." She was already calculating server pathways and attack vectors as she walked down the empty hallway. Her phone showed 108 minutes remaining. The school's computer lab would have the processing power she needed, but accessing it without raising suspicions would be tricky. The library's computers were less powerful but completely unsupervised. She chose the library. Mrs. Chen, the librarian, barely looked up from her cataloguing as Seraphina settled at a computer in the far corner. To anyone watching, she appeared to be working on homework, perhaps researching for a history paper. Her fingers moved slowly, deliberately, maintaining the facade of a struggling student pecking out a simple assignment. In reality, she was infiltrating the most sophisticated terrorist network in modern history. Her first probe revealed the scope of the attack. It was worse than she'd initially thought. The malware wasn't just targeting infrastructure, it was designed to make every failure look like an accident. Power grid overloads would appear to be equipment malfunctions. Hospital systems would fail due to apparent software glitches. The nuclear facilities would experience what seemed like routine cooling system errors. By the time anyone realized it was coordinated, the damage would be irreversible. Seraphina's fingers flew across the keyboard, her movements now betraying years of advanced training. She began by isolating the command nodes, tracing the attack's origin through 7 different countries and 12 proxy servers. The terrorists were good, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd left a signature in their code, a small redundancy that she'd seen before. She knew who was behind this. 3 years ago, she'd helped the FBI capture a cyber-terrorist named Marcus Volkov, known in criminal circles as the Architect. He'd been building a digital weapon capable of simultaneous infrastructure attacks, but they'd stopped him before he could deploy it. Apparently, someone had continued his work. Her phone showed 87 minutes remaining. Working faster now, she began deploying her own countermeasures. The attack was scheduled to begin with the East Coast power grid, cascading westward to create maximum psychological impact. If she could intercept the first wave, she might be able to trace the signal back to its source and shut down the entire operation. But she needed more processing power. "Sarah?" A voice behind her made her jump. She turned to see Dylan Marsh, one of her classmates, approaching with a confused expression. "What are you doing here? I thought you were in calculus." "Bathroom break," she said quickly, minimizing her windows to show what appeared to be a basic web search for quadratic formula examples. "Just looking up some homework stuff." Dylan peered at her screen. "Dude, that's like baby math. We learned that stuff freshman year." "Yeah, well," Seraphina forced a laugh, "I'm not exactly a math genius. Tell me about it. Harwick was just saying how you're probably going to fail the semester. No offense." Dylan grabbed a nearby computer and started pulling up what was obviously a gaming site. "Anyway, want to hang out after school? Me and Jake are going to hit the arcade." "Can't," Seraphina said, turning back to her screen. "I have to study." "Right. Good luck with that." As Dylan became absorbed in his game, Seraphina reopened her real windows. 73 minutes remaining. The first phase of the attack was beginning. She could see preliminary probes testing the East Coast grid's vulnerabilities. Her countermeasures were holding, but barely. She needed to make a choice. Maintain her cover and watch millions of people suffer, or reveal herself and stop the attack. The decision took exactly 2.3 seconds. Seraphina pulled out a second phone, this one completely black with no visible markings. She typed a single word: Phoenix. Within 30 seconds, her screen lit up with processing power she'd never accessed from a public terminal. Quantum encryption protocols appeared, satellite uplinks activated, and suddenly she was operating with the full backing of the United States intelligence apparatus. Now she could work. Her fingers moved like lightning across the keyboard, no longer hiding her true capabilities. Code scrolled across her screen faster than most people could read, each line representing another defensive measure deployed against the incoming attack. She traced the terrorists through their network, past their proxies, beyond their firewalls, into the heart of their operation. What she found there made her blood freeze. This wasn't just about infrastructure. The power outages were a diversion. While emergency services scrambled to restore electricity, a second wave of malware would infiltrate every major bank in the country, transferring billions of dollars to accounts controlled by a network of international criminals. The economic damage would take decades to repair. But even that wasn't the real goal. The third wave, set to deploy while authorities dealt with the power and financial crises, would target military command networks. Communication systems, missile defense protocols, intelligence databases, everything that kept America secure would be compromised simultaneously. This wasn't terrorism. This was the opening move of a war. Seraphina's phone showed 34 minutes remaining. She could stop the infrastructure attack, maybe even prevent the financial theft, but stopping all three phases would require resources beyond what she could access from a school computer. She needed help. But asking for help meant revealing her location, which meant ending her cover permanently. 3 years of careful planning, of building the perfect identity, would be destroyed. She'd never be able to return to this life, never be able to blend in as just another struggling student. Her finger hovered over the emergency contact button. Behind her, Dylan was completely absorbed in his game, occasionally muttering about noobs and kill streaks. Mrs. Chen continued cataloguing books, humming softly to herself. Outside the library windows, students walked between buildings, laughing and complaining about homework and weekend plans. Normal teenage problems, normal teenage lives, lives that would be shattered if she failed. Seraphina pressed the button. Emergency contact initiated appeared on her screen. Authentication required. She placed her thumb on the phone scanner and spoke a single phrase. Phoenix requests immediate extraction and full operational support. The response was immediate. Confirmed. Support en route. Maintain position. 28 minutes remaining. Now she could really work. Military-grade processing power flowed through her connection as specialists from 3 different agencies began providing real-time support. Her screen split into multiple windows, each tracking a different aspect of the attack as she orchestrated the most complex digital defense in history. The first wave hit at exactly 11:15 a.m. Power grids from Boston to Atlanta came under assault as millions of lines of malicious code tried to overload transformers and crash control systems. Seraphina's countermeasures met them head-on, filtering out the attacks while maintaining normal power flow. To anyone monitoring the grid, it would appear that nothing unusual was happening. The terrorists' second wave began immediately, targeting financial networks while they assumed authorities were distracted by power failures that hadn't actually occurred. Seraphina was ready for them. She'd spent the previous 15 minutes seeding the banking networks with her own code, creating a digital maze that would trap the attackers while protecting the actual financial data. But the third wave was the real challenge. Military networks were isolated, hardened, protected by every security measure the Pentagon could devise. The terrorists would need a different approach to crack them, something that might bypass all conventional defenses. Seraphina found it with 8 minutes to spare. Hidden within the malware was a completely separate program, designed to activate only after the first 2 waves had begun. It wasn't trying to attack military networks from the outside. Instead, it was designed to activate dormant code that had been bidden months ago by insiders, traitors within the military itself who had sold access to the highest bidder. This wasn't just a cyber attack. It was a coordinated assault involving corruption at the highest levels of government. Status report flashed on her screen. Third wave neutralized, she typed back. But we have a bigger problem. Multiple insiders confirmed, sending full intelligence package now. As she uploaded the evidence she'd gathered, footsteps echoed in the library hallway. Heavy footsteps. Official footsteps. Mrs. Chen looked up from her desk as three figures in dark suits entered the library. FBI, Seraphina realized, though they weren't displaying badges. The lead agent was a woman in her 40s with steel grey hair and the kind of expression that suggested she'd seen everything at least twice. "Excuse me," the agent said, approaching Mrs. Chen's desk. "We're looking for a student, Seraphina Cade." Mrs. Chen blinked in surprise. "Is she in some kind of trouble?" "Nothing like that. We just need to speak with her." Seraphina closed her laptop and stood up slowly. Every eye in the library turned toward her. Dylan's game playing had attracted three other students, all of whom were now staring with undisguised curiosity. "I'm Seraphina Cade," she said quietly. The lead agent studied her for a moment, taking in the oversized hoodie, the messy hair, the carefully cultivated image of academic mediocrity. "Miss Cade, I'm Agent Morrison with the FBI. We need you to come with us." "Am I under arrest?" Seraphina asked, playing her role to the end. "No, but we have some urgent matters to discuss." Dylan had forgotten about his game entirely. "Dude, Sarah, what did you do?" Mrs. Chen stood up from her desk, maternal instincts overriding curiosity. "Should I call her parents, the principal?" "That won't be necessary," Agent Morrison said. "Miss Cade, if you would please gather your things." As Seraphina packed her laptop and books, whispers spread through the library like wildfire. By the time they reached the hallway, students had begun emerging from classrooms to watch the spectacle. Word was spreading through the school with viral speed. Sarah Cade, the girl who barely passed math class, was being taken away by the FBI. They passed Mr. Harwick's classroom on the way to the exit. Through the window, Seraphina could see him mid-lecture, completely unaware that his disappointingly average student had just prevented the largest terrorist attack in American history. The irony wasn't lost on her. Outside, a black SUV waited in the visitor parking lot. As they walked toward it, Seraphina heard her name being called from behind. She turned to see Dylan running after them, his face flushed with exertion and confusion. "Sarah, wait," he called. "What's going on? Are you okay?" Agent Morrison stepped between them. "I'm sorry, but Miss Cade can't talk right now." "But she's just Sarah," Dylan protested, looking back and forth between the agent and his classmate. "She's not like a criminal or anything. She can barely pass calculus." For the first time since leaving the library, Seraphina smiled. "Actually, Dylan, I've never needed to pass calculus. I already knew it." Dylan's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. As they reached the SUV, Agent Morrison opened the passenger door. "Miss Cade, after you." Before getting in, Seraphina looked back at Roosevelt High School one last time. Students crowded against windows, teachers stood in doorways, and somewhere inside her empty desk in advanced calculus waited for a student who would never return. She'd saved millions of lives today, but in doing so, she'd lost the one thing she'd spent 3 years building, the chance to be ordinary. "Ready?" Agent Morrison asked. Seraphina nodded and got into the SUV. As they drove away from the school, Agent Morrison activated a secure communication device. "Phoenix is secure," she reported. "Crisis averted. All targets neutralized." "Copy that," came the response. "Debrief in 30 minutes. And Morrison? Tell Phoenix that was exceptional work. The president wants to speak with her personally." Seraphina stared out the window as they merged onto the highway, watching the ordinary world fade behind them. In a few hours, the news would report a series of minor computer glitches that had been quickly resolved. Power grids would continue functioning normally. Banks would process transactions without incident. Military networks would remain secure. No one would ever know how close they'd come to disaster. No one except the girl who used to get D's in calculus. Her phone buzzed one last time. A message from Dylan. "Dude, I just Googled quadratic formulas. You could have solved that in like 2 seconds. Who are you really?" Seraphina smiled and typed back, "Just someone who learned a long time ago that being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have." She deleted the message before sending it. Some secrets were worth keeping, even when the cover was blown. Outside the SUV's windows, America continued its normal day, protected by guardians most people would never notice, defended by heroes who looked like ordinary students, teachers, librarians, and countless others who chose to serve in shadows. The FBI needed her for a debriefing, the president wanted to thank her personally, And somewhere in a federal facility, her real life as Phoenix was waiting to resume. But as they drove toward that future, Seraphina found herself thinking about Dylan's confusion, Mr. Harwick's dismissive lectures, and Mrs. Chen's genuine concern. For 3 years, she'd lived among them as one of them, experiencing the small dramas and quiet joys of ordinary teenage life. She'd given that up to save the world. The question was, had it been worth it? The answer, she decided, depended on what came next. And for the first time in 3 years, Seraphina Kay had absolutely no idea what that might be. Agent Morrison glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Any regrets about blowing your cover?" Seraphina considered the question carefully. "Ask me again in a few years," she said finally, "when I see what kind of world we managed to save." The SUV continued down the highway, carrying its precious cargo toward a destiny that had always been waiting, just beneath the surface of ordinary life. Behind them, Roosevelt High School returned to its normal routine, forever changed by the knowledge that sometimes the most extraordinary people are the ones sitting right next to you, pretending to struggle with homework. And sometimes, when the world needs saving, they stop pretending. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoyed this story about hidden genius and the price of saving the world, consider subscribing for more tales of extraordinary people living ordinary lives, until the moment they don't.